planning a trip these days. Wow. It's a whole universe online, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
You're bouncing between airline sites, scrolling through what feels like, I don't know, infinite hotel reviews, watching these amazing travel vlogs, seeing stunning photos of places you might never have even considered before. The sheer amount of information available is just, well, incredible.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that easy access to information, it's completely shifted the game for travel destinations themselves.
Oh, so?
Well, they aren't just competing with the town next door or maybe the state next door anymore. They're competing with places like halfway across the world.
Exactly. And that global competition brings us neatly to today's deep dive.
Okay.
We're turning our attention to India, specifically the really, really well-known tourist hub of Goa.
Right, Goa.
We have one key source for this deep dive. It's an audio clip that puts forward a very strong perspective on the challenges Goa's tourism is grappling with right now.
Okay, a specific viewpoint.
Yeah, and according to this viewpoint, Goa is actually losing its competitive edge. Not just within India, but increasingly on that global stage you just mentioned.
So our mission in this deep dive, then, is to really get inside that specific perspective, the one shared in this audio clip.
That's it.
We want to understand the exact reasons this source pinpoints for Goa's reported tourism struggles and, critically, look at the comparisons it draws with other countries. Basically, what does this source say is happening and why?
And it sounds like this entire discussion, well, in this particular source anyway, was really sparked by a specific reported decision. Apparently, the Goan government decided to ban ride-sharing services like Ola and Uber in favor of a local taxi system.
Oh, interesting.
A move this source calls, right up front, a foolish move.
Okay, so let's unpack this perspective on Goa's challenges then. Where does it start?
Well, the source opens by stating that Goa has seen a decline in tourists over the last couple of years.
Okay.
With a noticeable drop specifically in foreign tourists this past year.
Right, and the argument made is that the government really needs to understand the problem in totality. It's not just, one simple thing that's gone wrong.
Exactly.
And a huge part of that totality, according to this source, is the fact that today is the age of information.
Right. That point is hammered home.
Yeah, it says information spreads lightning fast now, completely different from the pre-COVID era.
That's such a crucial shift, isn't it? I mean, during COVID, so many more people got comfortable online, glued to YouTube, scrolling Instagram, watching travel vlogs.
Exactly.
This perspective emphasizes that people in positions of power absolutely must understand this fundamental change in how potential tourists discover places, share experiences, and ultimately, well, decide where to go.
And because information travels so freely online now, destinations that might have seemed distant or maybe obscure before are suddenly right there in people's feeds. This source specifically points to countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka. It argues these places are offering amazing places at affordable rates and are giving Goa, well, tough competition.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting hearing the specific examples this source uses to back up that claim. Let's start with Sri Lanka. What does it say?
So Sri Lanka. The source talks about a 2-week trip there and highlights things like the roads, saying they were super smooth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no damaged roads, particularly the southern part from Colombo down to Tengali. Traffic was reportedly decent too.
And the food in Sri Lanka, what's the take there?
It described as great, often similar to South Indian food, which makes sense, but also with options like English, Lebanese, Israeli, and Russian, plus amazing seafood, apparently.
That's good.
But the real standout in this account seems to be accommodation.
Really? How so?
Yes, accommodation is called dirt cheap in this source.
Dirt cheap.
Yeah, the claim is you can easily find big, spacious, well-maintained, air-conditioned rooms for less than 1,200 Indian rupees.
Wow, less than 1,200.
Yeah. And rooms that look better looking than Goa, according to this view. And hostels. Even cheaper than Goa, apparently.
Okay, that's a significant comparison.
Beaches are mentioned too beautiful and described as sunny or more sunnier than Goa.
Right.
What's fascinating here is the direct link drawn between Sri Lanka's growing presence on the tourist map and online content.
Ah, the vlogger effect.
Exactly. The source explicitly says it's popular thanks to YouTubers and vloggers.
And transportation there. You mentioned accommodation being cheap.
Transportation, too.
Yeah.
This perspective calls it even cheaper than Thailand.
Even cheaper, okay.
It mentions excellent, enjoyable bus services that are fast on winding roads with, no waiting time. Tuk-tuks and autos are cheap. And get this, bike rentals.
Yeah.
Reportedly 50% less than in Goa. cited as 250, 350 INR compared to the 750 INR the source claims is charged in Goa.
Half price.
Yeah.
That's quite a difference.
It is. And the source notes that Sri Lanka saw a surge in tourism post-COVID, bouncing back despite previous challenges like the church bomb explosions.
Right, I remember that.
Because travelers discovered how cheap accommodation is and that the food is decent, even amidst inflation.
So that paints a pretty clear picture from this source's perspective on Sri Lanka as a competitor. What about Thailand? It's always been popular.
Thailand, yeah. According to this view, it was always there as a strong tourist destination, but it saw a huge increase in footfall post-COVID, specifically because, the source states, the rates are cheaper.
Cheaper across the board, like Sri Lanka? Is that the claim?
Yes, particularly taxi fares, that's highlighted. The source gives specific examples.
Like what?
Claiming 3 kilometers in Phuket is 20 baht, which it says is not even 60 INR.
60 rupees for 3 kilometers.
Yeah. And in Bangkok or Pattaya, it's reportedly hardly 10 to 15 baht.
Wow, okay. That's a significant difference if those numbers are, generally accurate. And food in Thailand.
They're described as very good and so cheap. The source claims you can easily eat within 100 Indian rupees.
100 rupees.
Yeah. Now, it does say Indian food is more expensive there, but this perspective says it's still sort of on par with Goan prices.
Implying Goan food is generally costly then.
That seems to be the implication, yes.
Convenience sounds like a big factor, too, in these comparisons.
Absolutely. Thailand has apps like Grab, which the source calls so bloody cheap.
Right.
And very convenient for solo travelers, highlighting the ease, no hassle, no harassment, fixed prices, that kind of thing.
Which ties back to the whole OLA UBER ban discussion for Goa, presumably.
Exactly.
And accommodation in Thailand. Does it echo the trend seen in Sri Lanka in this source?
Right, precisely. Also described as dirt cheap. Easily less than 1,200 INR compared to Goa, with hostels being even more affordable.
Okay. And finally, Vietnam comes up as a competitor, too.
It does. This source calls Vietnam a beautiful place, perhaps not as crowded as Thailand yet, but
developing fast.
yeah, rapidly developing its beach infrastructure. It mentions projects like building ghost cities and developing beach areas, like anything.
Wow, ghost cities.
Yeah. The source warns that the competition will get even tougher from Vietnam, noting that it also uses convenient apps like Grab.
So the big takeaway from this source's view of these competitor countries is, well, that they're really challenging Goa, especially on price, the overall ease of the tourist experience.
Yeah.
And the fact that all this information is so readily available online, making them easy to discover and, plan trips too.
Right. And against this backdrop of these rising international competitors, this perspective highlights specific disadvantages that it feels are holding Goa back.
Okay, what are those according to this source?
The first point raised is high airfares,
Right.
particularly affecting visitors from North India. This source argues these are the actual people who are giving you revenue when they fly in.
Makes sense.
It claims the airfares are so high, it's actually cheaper for North Indians to fly to Thailand, the Far East, or Sri Lanka.
Cheaper to fly internationally than domestically.
That's the claim from this source. And this view suggests that the Goan government, referred to here as a double-engine government.
That term for state and central alignment.
Right. It suggests they need to talk to airlines to get those fares reduced.
Okay, so airfares is one. What's next?
Then there's a major focus on what this source labels the taxi mafia.
Yes. This came up earlier with the OLA UBER ban.
Exactly. This is described as the tourist's first point of contact. And the source provides pretty striking examples of exorbitant charges, like 1,000 INR for a mere 3 kilometers ride.
1,000 rupees for 3 kilometers.
That's the figure given, yeah. This perspective argues this situation causes harassment and is a major turnoff right upon arrival.
I can imagine, especially for tired travelers.
Exactly. Whether they are friends traveling together or, middle-aged couples with kids, the source even speculates that the underdeveloped bus infrastructure in Goa might have been done purposely to help the taxi mafia.
Oof, that's a strong claim.
It is. But the point is, getting that negative taste of the taxi mafia right away just creates a bad first impression.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? Accommodation, you mentioned it was cheaper elsewhere.
Yes. Accommodation issues are also a significant complaint in this source. It claims prices are generally high in Goa,
Okay.
with things like food costing nothing is below 200 rupees, and even mediocre options being priced expensively. Off the B is the phrase used, I think, meaning off the charts.
Right, but it's not just price, is it?
No, and this is maybe more concerning. The source describes instances where tourists who have booked accommodation, especially during peak season, arrive only to be denied entry.
What? Denied
Yeah,
you.
told it's suddenly booked, and then they're forced to find overpriced alternatives on the spot or just go elsewhere.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It does. And this source explicitly claims this kind of thing doesn't happen in other countries like the ones it mentioned.
Right.
It describes the pain of being turned away in the middle of the night, sometimes having to pay for another expensive taxi just to find somewhere else to stay. This attitude from hotelers or lodgers is specifically pointed out as a serious problem.
Okay, that's bad. Anything else?
Violence and scams also feature in this source's critique.
Oh, dear.
It mentions disco scams, where tourists are allegedly overbilled drastically for watered-down drinks, sometimes running into thousands of rupees.
Thousands.
Yeah, with local mafia reportedly involved and using violence to demand money. The source claims videos of these incidents are readily available on YouTube.
Gosh.
It also brings up instances where tourist frustration, perhaps triggered by something like those accommodation issues we just talked about, leads to the tourists being attacked, with violence used when people are in groups. Again, this perspective states clearly that this doesn't happen outside countries, like the competitors mentioned earlier.
That paints a very concerning picture.
It does. And finally, this source argues that Goa has a misplaced competition focus.
What does that mean?
It believes Goa's real competition is overseas, Thailand, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, not other Indian states like Kerala or Karnataka.
Why not other Indian states?
The reasoning here, according to the source, is that places like Kerala and Goa have similar high pricing anyway. And while Karnataka has beaches, they aren't seen as comparable, and the overall footfall is just different.
Okay.
This perspective compares the travel difference from North India to Goa with the difference to Sri Lanka, stating that international options can sometimes be cheaper, as we heard with the airfares.
Right.
It also highlights that staying longer in Goa tends to get much more expensive than in the competitor countries it discussed.
So that's a pretty critical assessment of Goa's current situation from this particular viewpoint. It sounds quite negative. Does the source acknowledge any of Goa's strength?
It does, actually. It's not entirely negative.
Okay.
This source explicitly states that Goa's location, its golden sands, and its amazing sunsets are simply unparalleled compared to any state of India.
Unparalleled, even compared to Kerala.
Yes, including Kerala, which it calls beautiful but not as sunny and vibrant, or Gokarna in Karnataka. It definitely acknowledges that the natural beauty is a truly unique and powerful asset for Goa.
Okay, so the location is amazing, but
the source strongly argues location alone isn't enough in today's crowded global market.
right. So what is needed, according to this source?
It identifies the absolutely key needs for tourists beyond just that beautiful location. The top three are logistics.
Meaning transport.
Yes, meaning transportation, which needs to be seamless, easily available, affordable, and simple to use. And importantly, the source says destinations must have apps that work and not shun technology.
Okay, logistics. What else?
And accommodation, which needs to be affordable and decent.
Logistics and accommodation. Affordable, accessible.
Those are the big two. Food affordability is seen by this perspective as sort of secondary, depending more on the individual tourist budget,
Got it. So the core argument for change from this source is clear. Fixed transportation and accommodation.
Exactly. That's what will truly pull people to Goa again. This view believes that if these fundamental issues are sorted, other things, like maybe more diverse and affordable food choices, will naturally follow.
And there's an economic argument tied to this too, right? About not just focusing on one group.
Yes, there's a strong economic point made.
Okay.
This source argues that focusing solely on protecting the short-term interests of groups like the taxi mafia actually jeopardizes the entire rest of the Goan economy that relies on tourism.
Right. Everyone else.
Yeah, all the accommodation providers, the food vendors, the other service businesses. This view suggests that tourists who are aware of what is going, thanks to all that online information we talked about, will simply choose to stop coming altogether, which ultimately hurts everyone in the long run. Lowering prices for tourists, this perspective argues, is actually a win-win for everyone.
And this brings us back to the power of information spreading online, doesn't it? Word of mouth, YouTube videos.
Incredibly powerful. And the source bluntly states you can't fight that with things like copyright strikes.
Ah.
It also highlights that the young people Goa often attracts are real influencers in their own right.
Yeah, through their own social media.
Exactly. And this source argues they're increasingly choosing places like Thailand, Sri Lanka, or Vietnam because they have discovered they are a much better option based on cost and the overall experience.
So what's the closing argument from this source's perspective?
It's basically that the competitive landscape has dramatically intensified, yet Goa, in its view, seems stuck on helping your taxi mafia.
Which is seen as bad economics.
Yeah, fundamentally poor economics in the face of these global options. Tourists have choices now, and Goa, this perspective concludes, is no longer the source really calls for decision makers to truly understand the psychology of the tourist.
Okay, so let's quickly try and pull out the absolute core view presented in this source, just to summarize it clearly.
Okay, from this particular perspective, the main takeaway is that Goa is losing tourists primarily because of high costs and negative experiences.
Especially transport and accommodation.
Exactly, particularly concerning transportation and accommodation, while these international competitors offer significantly better value for money.
And this is amplified by
the huge amount of information available online today, which highlights these alternative, more affordable destinations.
Right. So the source believes Goa urgently needs to prioritize what?
Making transportation affordable and convenient, specifically mentioning the use of apps like Grab elsewhere, being cheap, and arguing Goa shouldn't reject technology like OLA Uber, but make it work affordably, along with providing affordable accommodation. Essentially prioritize those things over focusing on protecting existing vested interests, like the taxi groups mentioned.
Okay. So there you have it. We've taken a deep dive into one specific perspective on the, well, significant challenges currently facing Goa's tourism industry, drawing directly from the arguments and detailed examples provided in this single audio source.
Yeah, and the central theme coming through from this viewpoint is certainly how the explosive growth and accessibility of online information has truly leveled the playing field globally.
Right.
Destinations, according to this source, are now absolutely forced to compete aggressively, not just on the beauty they offer, but on fundamental factors like overall cost and the practical quality of the tourist experience.
Yeah, the basics. So based on this perspective, it really makes you think, doesn't it? In a world where everyone is sharing their travel experiences online, good and bad, and destinations can't just rely on being naturally beautiful anymore, how much does the basic stuff like, how easy and cheap it is to get from the airport to your hotel, or just the price of a decent meal truly determine where travelers decide to spend their money?